Not many people remember the very long tornado outbreak sequence that happened in May of 2004, but you might know the first notable that we're going to talk about that happened over the course of these 10 days in May. First off, looking at our outlook here for or by the NWS, the SPC, we have a high risk, and this is mainly tornado driven, with a 25% hatched for tornadoes that are F2 and above. This was also a multi-event sequence. A low pressure didn't just constantly cause cold fronts. Multiple separate systems went through. The biggest events from the 21st through the 23rd, a little bit on the 24th, a little major on the 26th and 7th, but mainly the biggest two on the 21st, 23rd, as well as the 29th and 31st. Again, that high risk was in place specifically on the 22nd, which is one of the largest days of this event, as well as throughout the 29th and 31st. Once more, multiple low pressures came in with very classic setups, very typical, with a total of 389 tornadoes that happened over the course of 10 days. 22 of them would be significant, 10 intense, with 2 violent tornadoes. So nowhere near the intensity of, let's say, the 2011 super outbreak or the 74 super outbreak. Still a pretty impressive amount of tornadoes, of which you would expect a lot more than just 7 deaths. This is still unfortunate, as well as 123 injuries, but you would typically expect to see a lot more. Thank goodness there was not. This event would also cause $240 million in damage. Our first notable, like I said, is probably the most famous of all of the tornadoes that happened. This is the Dakin to Palmyra, Nebraska F4 that happened on the 22nd. Shorthand called the Halem, Nebraska F4, or just the Halem F4 for short. This tornado had a path of more than 80 kilometers long, reaching 4 kilometers wide at its widest point. Despite this, it would only kill 1, injure 38, but still cause $160 million in damage. As you can see from this track here, it varied significantly in width and intensity. While the wider it got, it usually did increase in strength. Just after Halem, we see it still reaching F3, F4 intensity. This tornado is a perfect case study on just how unpredictable tornadoes can be, although that is not the topic that I'm going to go into. The most amount of damage was caused in Halem, where 95% of the town would be destroyed, where it was mostly F4 damage. As we can see also in the hook echo down here, the bottom right, this is a little loose. This doesn't seem as tightly wound, but that's mainly due to how wide the tornado was. Additionally, a coal train car with an unknown weight, because of course, was tossed off of its tracks in Halem. The second notable and the only other violent tornado would happen a week later from south of Weathersby to south of Bethany, Missouri. This F4 on the 29th had a path of around 35 kilometers and caused 3 deaths. This tornado would destroy one home as well as a few mobile homes in Weatherby, and other than that, it would trek rural areas throughout the remainder of its life. Given that, this sounds like something. This is the kind of information that you get in 1906 or the 1896 sequence, not modern times, but thankfully it didn't do that much, so there's not that much to report. Our last notable is an F3 that happened on the 30th from the south of Tazewell to Hogtown, Indiana. With a path of 24 kilometers long, it is also responsible for 1 death and approximately 11 injuries. Really, all the information that I found there was just repeated the same things. It was multi-vortex, and it destroyed around 80% of the town of Marengo. So what makes this thing so significant? There was 168 tornadoes within 32 hours from the 21st to the 22nd and 23rd, one of the largest portions of the outbreak. A majority of them also occurred on the 29th and 31st, like I had mentioned earlier. This is pretty typical in the realm of where tornadoes happened in May. This isn't, out in Nevada and Idaho, but still a lot. Additionally, the Halem F4 is the second largest tornado ever recorded in terms of width. Um, what we would call width, I would say, because the Muhal F4 of 99 is debatably in there. Anyway, the Halem F4 reached again 2.5 miles wide. This will only be beaten 9 years later by the May 2013 El Reno tornado, officially rated the F3, even though it's officially rated the F5. I'm not going into that either. That reached 2.6 miles wide. So it's unknown if there is a maximum width a tornado can possibly be. Theoretically, there isn't. Um, but I would wager that this is pretty much the widest a tornado can get. With Muhal, that is up for debate because you're talking about wind field instead of actual damage track. But again, that's not the topic here. This was. Oh, dang, I forgot I did that. Apologies. This is one of the longest tornadic sequences ever recorded. This is 10 whole days, almost the same length as the May 1896 event length, and is a little weird with how it's lumped together, just like the May 1896 events. Personally, I would see this more as two separate events with other smaller events lumped in there, which, yes, you can still call a sequence. In total, though, 26 states and one Canadian province, Ontario, would be affected. That is an extremely large amount of states. That's over half. Just one over half, but still half of the states in the US would be affected. That is crazy. Most of the tornadoes would happen in Nebraska and Kansas, a little bit in Missouri. So obviously, this is not equally spread out with every single state and Canadian province affected, but still, it is still something that you really don't normally see, even with a relatively large sequence. Usually, you just have pattern after pattern set up following the exact same setup, more or less, and not in different spots. But that's what happened here. That said, folks, that is all that I have for this event. A not so notable one, really, and really that's a good thing. This thing was not as violent as the 74 Super or the 2011 Super, and let's be glad that it is. It's very fortunate that only 7 died, even though that is 7 too many. I hope to see you all in the next one, and I thank you all so much for watching.